Welcome to Money Matters with Doug Jones, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. For today's show, I thought we'd talk about your credit. Specifically, what's your credit report? What's a credit rating? What's a credit score? There seems to be a bunch of confusion about these topics. In addition, if you've had some problems in the past and your credit got bruised, how do you rebuild it? And joining us today is Bruce Sellery. Now, I'd say Bruce is an expert in this field. Bruce is currently the CEO of Credit Canada Debt Solutions. But in addition, he's done a lot of other stuff. He's been a business journalist, an anchor, a keynote speaker, a podcaster, and has written 2 best-selling books. The first one is entitled Moolah La, Why Smart People Do Dumb Things with Their Money and What You Can Do About It. And then the second one was Moolah La, Guide to Rocking Your RSP, 5 steps, start rocking in 5 easy steps. So Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You forgot about the fact that I did 2 tours on the International Space Station as the first financial literacy expert in space.
Yeah, I must have missed that one in the bio.
Okay, I made that up. Fine.
All right, so let's start with, tell us what Credit Canada Debt Solutions does.
Okay, our mission is very simple. Our mission is to help people get out of debt so they can get back to life. So there is a lot of information. There is a lot of stuff available from the banks, from the credit unions, from nonprofits. There's tons of information out there on the broad area of financial well-being. Our focus is very clearly on debt. And that includes both credit, which we're going to talk about, but also the level at which your cash flow lives, right? Because you need to have positive cash flow in order to eliminate debt. So we're all about helping people eliminate their debt so that, and this is important, so they can get back to life. Because a lot of times people see this eliminate your debt as a goal in and of itself. And it isn't a goal in and of itself, but I think of it as like a pit stop on the way to something much, much more attractive, much, much more compelling. And that is a great life. So why do you want to get rid of your debt? You want to get rid of your debt so that you can improve your marriage, so you can sleep better at night, so that you can have more time to hang out with your kids, so you can buy a house, so you can take a vacation, so all these other things. And I think it's so important to include those kind of higher order things as well as the feelings that go along with it, because so much of this is intangible. Yeah, you want to tangibly take that debt from X to 0. You want to improve that credit score from here to there. But why? Because it makes you feel better. It reduces your stress. It can make life easier to live, and it can make you happier. So I think that's the most important thing to know about our mission is we help you get out of debt so that you can get back to life.
I think that's a fantastic summary. As we talked about off air, I have worked with credit counseling in the past, and that's a great summary of what you're doing. You also highlighted on the need to improve your credit score because it will help you accomplish those other objectives. So I really want to focus on how to rebuild credit if people have had a problem. But before we do that, I think we need to start with the basics.
Yeah.
So we talk about a credit report, a credit rating, and a credit score. Credit score is the one we hear the most about. Yeah. And I don't think people understand how they interrelate to each other and what the differences are. Yeah. So let's start with the credit score, that 3-digit number that can have some pretty positive or negative effects on you when you seek credit.
Yeah, the credit score is a lender's view of how good a bet you are. If you've got a really, really, really high score, if they're going to loan you money, they have a great degree of confidence that it's going to be paid back in full and on time. If you have a really, really low credit score, they're like not super interested in taking a gamble on you because that low score would say, I don't know if I'm going to get paid back on time and in full. So it's so important to have a reasonably good score. I mean, having a great score is awesome, but here's why. 3 main reasons. First, it lowers does your cost to borrow. So if you've got a fantastic score, you can go to a bank, you can go to a credit union, you can go to a lender and get access to capital at a fairly cheap rate. And these days, I mean, getting a line of credit is super, super cheap. If you don't have a good score, you're going to have to go somewhere else to borrow money. And the rates of interest that you will be charged at other places, alternative financial services, payday loans, are way, way higher than you'd get if you got the best rate at a bank. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you've got a good score, you've got more of an ability to borrow. So those people with a great credit score are going to be able to buy a mortgage that gets them the house that they want. People with a low score would be like, I'm sorry, we can't give you a mortgage, or at least not a mortgage of that amount, because in the past you haven't demonstrated an ability to repay in full and on time. And the third thing is, it affects you in other areas of your life, right? You go to rent an apartment, and these days the landlord may well ask to see your credit score. You got a great score, you're more likely to get the apartment. You have a terrible score, you're less likely to get that apartment. Some employers ask for a credit score as well. So it can affect you in lots and lots of different areas. And that's why it's so important to know what it is and to know what drives it so that you can improve it.
Okay, so you've highlighted on my next question, what drives it? How do you calculate a credit score so people can understand how to improve it?
Okay, so there's two major bureaus in this country, TransUnion and Equifax, and their models kind of like this black box. Like there's I don't know, there's mathematicians and programmers who are like, I don't know, let's do this. And so there's a whole bunch of math behind the scenes, but I'm going to simplify it by looking at the five main drivers, and they account for a different percentage of that score. So the first is payment history. Did you pay on time? Very simple. The second is called credit utilization, which is to say, how much of your credit do you currently have as an outstanding balance? And the reason that's important is, say you've got $10,000 in credit available to you and you've used $3,000 that's outstanding on your credit cards. The lenders are like, if she loses her job or he loses his job, there's $7,000 in wiggle room. That's okay. But say you'd already used up $9,000 on that, they're a little like, if he loses her job or she loses her job, there's no wiggle room. So that's a problem. So that's credit utilization. You want to be below about 30%. The third thing is credit history. And that is to say, how long have you had this relationship? There is a value for you to have had a relationship for long periods of time. And this one's super important because sometimes people are like, okay, I'm culling my credit cards. I'm going through, I'm not going to have so many credit cards. You want to make sure that you don't get rid of the card that you have had for the longest period of time. So say, you were a student and you got a credit card in early 2000 or something. That's a card to keep in your wallet and use every once in a while because it's going to help your credit score because the history is so long. The second to last one is diversity of credit. So they look and they say, oh, he's got a car loan and he's got a line of credit and she's got a credit card here and she's got a store card there. There's lots of different things. That is better than just, whoa, she's only got one credit card. And the last one is what are called credit inquiries. So these are, it's called a hard pull when you apply for a credit card. And what the credit bureaus get a little bit anxious about, or at least the mathematical model does, is if all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of new inquiries, that's going to put pressure on your score because it's like, oh, they're in trouble. Why are there so many credit inquiries? So that one is the lowest impact in terms of the overall score, but those are the five.
Okay, so let's now talk about, we're going to cover some of what you talked in our second segment when we talk about rebuilding. Let's talk about a credit rating. So we've talked about your score and we'll come back to what's positive and negative, but what about the rating? How's that different from the score?
It's a part of the score. It's an ingredient in the score. So when people talk about credit rating, they're talking about something that relates to a payment, and there's a letter. So a score is a number, maybe it's 760 or 650 or 820. A credit rating is a letter. So when you look at your, if you were to look up your credit rating, you'd see lots of different things. And there could be an R0, which means that you don't have enough history there on a revolving piece of credit like a credit card, or an R9, which is you do not want an R9 on your file because that means that it's gone to collections. It's a bad debt. It could be an installment loan is on there. That would have the letter I. So I think it's important. We'll talk about these definitions, but in my view, the only one that really matters is the score. So focus on the score, focus on what drives the score, focus on the behavior that is helpful to improving your score and improving your financial well-being overall. But I don't talk much about the credit rating. Not that doesn't matter. It's just too many things for us to keep in our minds at all times.
Yeah, and I think one of the distinctions is you have a rating of each type of credit you have, and your score is your overall effect. So you want those individual line ratings to be positive if you want the positive score.
Yeah, it's almost analogous to a grade point average in an academic institution. Like you want to make sure you do well in history and well in biology, but then it all gets summed up into one thing. And what the marketplace cares about is the final score. You have to pay attention to all those drivers, but don't get too obsessed with one particular piece because it's the overall score that's the most important thing.
Okay, and then we summarize it all on a credit report. So maybe you can kind of go through the viewers. What's in a report? Why is that important?
Well, it's interesting to read. I don't know when you last looked at yours, but I found mine fascinating because it includes all sorts of information about your history and lenders and when you had the credit since. And there may be some surprises on that credit report, which is why it's really helpful to go and look at it, because you'll be like, wait a second, I don't have that credit card, or I didn't miss that payment. They say I missed that payment. I did not miss that payment. And so it's important to look at your credit report periodically, because sometimes there's errors, right? The system is not perfect. And you may need to go back to the credit bureaus to say, hey, I think there's an error here on your report. So the report is more detailed, and it can give you even some indications to say, oh, here's the one that's I'm really getting dinged by. So that's the one I need to really make sure that I pay, on time on in the future.
Okay, so you've highlighted a couple of things that we'll also talk about when in the rebuilding part, which is people should access their credit report so that they can check for inaccuracies annually, semi-annually. What are you telling people?
Well, I would say annually. So I've set up a credit score monitoring process through one of the fintechs, and there's a bunch. It's very easy to get your credit score for free online. There's a whole bunch of places that you can do that. And with the bureaus themselves, you can go to the bureaus themselves and you can get your credit report once per year from them. So the fintechs will give it to you more frequently, but the bureaus can do that. Just find out the information. And what's so interesting to me is that some people have a real aversion to knowing what's going on their score. And I think that is in part because they add a layer of morality on top of it, right? So that if I've got a bad score, it means I'm a bad person. If I've got a good score, it means I'm a good person. That's not true. It's actually not true. All it does is reflect what has been going on in your financial life for a period of time. It's analogous to hopping on the scale. Some people have a real reticence to hopping on the scale because it just adds a whole bunch of stuff that they believe is a reflection of their character. Like if I'm this weight, I'm terrible. If I'm this weight, I'm good. It doesn't mean that. All it means is you hop on the scale and this is you weigh what you weigh. Now, like a scale, sometimes the number on that scale and the number on your credit score is an opening for action. Like you look at that number and go, okay, hold on, I need to do something differently. So for example, if I were to hop on a scale and realize and see that I was 20 pounds heavier than what I believe is my ideal weight, I would be exercising more and eating less, in particular, less chocolate cake and Oreo cookies. So there's be an opening for action. If you look at your credit score and you see, I'm at 650. That's a call to action because there are some things that you need to do in order to improve that score, but not because you're not a good person, not because you're lazy, just because your score isn't workable with what you want to accomplish in your life.
All right. So I think that's a perfect segue to, we're going to take the break now. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about if life events have happened and your score got bruised, how do we fix it? So we'll see you after the break.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
was John's graduation. We were so proud. We all got together for a picnic. That's when we heard coming from the radio. So we stopped and we listened. It helped us get to safety. That's why when I think of John, because now he has a real future to look forward to.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Doug Jones. And today we're talking about credit. And our guest today is Bruce Sellery, who's the CEO of Credit Canada Debt Solutions. In the first half, I also highlight everything else you've been doing, Bruce. You're a podcaster, a keynote speaker. You've written books. Like, he is a known personality in...
I'm a hand model as well. I do some hand modeling. I'm kidding. I do hand modeling.
Okay. That goes with the space
That's right. That's right.
So we were talking about your credit score, your credit rating, your credit history. So now I'd like to focus really on if you've had problems in the past, and life happens, as you were pointing out in the first segment, people can have bad scores for a variety of reasons. And, life events happen to people and that can affect your score. Yeah. So if that has occurred, you're going to want to rebuild the score because it's going to help you seek credit, get better rates. You see advertising that's on that OA, unapproved credit, that a lot of people aren't sure what that OAC means, but it's unapproved credits. It means you got a good score. So what are the steps people should go through to help working on improving their score?
So first thing is get your credit score. So you know what you're dealing with. And there's a lot of reticence about that. Like, I'm concerned about that. Get the score. Every single lender already knows everything about you, so you may as well know what they know about you. Second is, it really is about fundamentally improving your behavior with credit. So there are some tactical things you can do, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But mostly, you just need to be better with your credit. And that's then going to flow through to that metric called the score over the course of time. So I talked about the 5 ways that score is assessed. Let's just look at a couple of them and talk about credit rebuilding in that context. First is payment history. This really, 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 really matters. So what you need to do is reorient your life such that you pay off all of your bills on time. One hack to that process is to set those bills up for automatic payment every single month. So they just come out of their account. Now, some people have volatile income or they're concerned that they're going to have money in the bank to do that. What you can also do is set up overdraft protection on that bank account. Costs $5 or whatever it costs, but it means that you don't have to worry about being careless with paying those bills. They're automatically going to come off every single month. Now, that doesn't address a fundamental cash flow issue if you have one, but if cash flow isn't the problem in the moment, you've got the money, but you've just been not able to get it together to pay your bills in time, this strategy can really work. The second thing is credit utilization, is work to get that down below the 30%. Now, some people tactically would say, well, get more credit, because if you've got $3,000 outstanding and only access to $5,000, you're way over your utilization. If you had $10,000 available, then that would improve your utilization score. The pitfall is you don't want to take on more credit if there's a risk that you're going to get into more trouble. So that one you really have to be cognizant of. I talked about credit history. Don't get rid of your old cards. Diversity of credit. Yeah, so you may want to look at getting a different credit card somewhere. The other dynamic, depending on how serious your issue is and what your score is, it may make a ton of sense to get a secured credit card. So basically what this is you apply for one and you put a certain amount of money on the table so that the issuer knows they don't have to worry about you paying their money back because you've secured it. So say it's a credit card with $1,000 limit, you cut them a check for $1,000. And if you don't pay, they've already got your money, they're good. But it's then credit behavior behavior that's reported back to the bureaus, and that can definitely help you over time. So I think those are like the key number one most important things. The secured credit card, make at least the minimum payment by the due date, but ideally you're going to chip your way at it and reduce that balance over time. And then it's more about the fundamental habits of making sure that you live within your means.
Yeah, so I'd like to follow up on just a couple of those points. Like one that I see in my business is, and you've already highlighted it, you try to tackle it. And so you sort of say, well, I'm going to pay this credit card off. And you're right, it's the one they've had for the longest history. And then they cancel it. Well, what they did is they shifted the balance to a new card that has no history on it and is now beyond its 30%, and they just compound the problem. Yeah. And they think that they're getting a better approach to it because maybe they're getting a better interest rate, but the reality is they've actually harmed their score. Yeah. Another myth that I hear all the time that I think is important in the credit rebuilding is I make all my minimum payments on time, but they're at 100% capacity on multiple credit lines, and that's your utilization. And I don't know if you want to expand on that, but it creates a problem.
It creates a huge problem. And I think, so how do you address that? Well, you chip it down. You may also be able to do some sort of a debt consolidation loan, depending on what the score is, right? So you've got, I don't know, you've got 3 credit cards, they're maxed out. It may be that there are lenders, and if your score is good enough, maybe it's even your bank to say, listen, we're going to get a home equity line of credit and we're going to consolidate that debt and remove it from the credit cards and use some of the equity in your house to pay it off. This is risky. It's risky because I have a real concern that people are going to use their house as an ATM. And Correct. If you own a house, hooray for you, because the price of that house is in all likelihood much higher than what you paid for it, 5 or 10 years ago. But you don't want to start eating away on that equity because your cash, your expenses are exceeding your income. The other thing that I would say in all of this, some of our viewers might be like a little overwhelmed because we're talking about lots of different things. It really can make a difference to call a nonprofit credit counselor at the beginning of it. So our agency, and we're one of many in this country who are set up as nonprofits, where our history is as nonprofit credit counseling societies in your local community. And our counselors, what they do every single day is they pick up the phone and they talk to people with these questions. For some people, they need a consumer proposal, and we will make a referral to a licensed insolvency trustee if that makes sense. For some people, they need a debt consolidation program. We can do that. Some people just need some basic counseling, like, okay, I got to improve my credit. What should I do? And they'll talk through the score and they'll go over in more detail some of the tips that we've talked about. And some people need some basic budgeting help. Like, how do I think this through? I've got this much money coming in. How can I make sure that I've got a little bit left over at the end of the month so I've got some stuff to save? So I'm a huge advocate for calling a nonprofit credit counselor out of the gate because they've got lots of different resources that they can share based on your situation.
And I think you're highlighting on another important component of credit rebuilding, which is, I'm going to call it good financial habits, which I'm an accountant, I'm an LIT, that means a budget to me. Yeah. And I think that's what's so important to people is if you're going to try to get on top of this, get the debt levels down so that your utilization isn't too high, and you're trying to tackle this, you need a budget to figure out how you're going to do it, because it's also going to tell you whether or not you can do it on your own or if you're going to need to seek help. Yeah. And so that goes to your point of contacting someone like yourself who can, the counselors there can work you through the budget. And that's the sort of the self-help option. Yeah. And if you're beyond the self-help option, then they can look and explore other options for you. Yeah.
And everybody needs to take a Xanax when they heard, not literally take a Xanax, because that would lead to a terrible abuse of prescription drugs. But what I mean by that is take a chill pill, take a deep breath when you hear budget, because a lot of people get very anxious at that notion because it seems so daunting. It seems like a task that is so beyond them, both in terms of the analysis required and the discipline required to stick to a budget. One thing that you can do in the shorter term even before you commit to a budget, is analyze your spending. So, I mean, in very simple terms, how much do you have coming in and where is the money going out? Put that on one piece of paper or in one Excel document or on one napkin. And you're going to learn something. You're going to realize, oh, wait a sec, this is not sustainable. There's no way that I can do this unless I quadruple my income or whatever the insight is. So you analyze it first, you get a sense for what's coming in, what's going out, brainstorm ways that you could change that. Maybe it's debt consolidation, maybe it's driving for Uber Eats, maybe it's getting rid of your cable package, and then commit to change. Commit to changing a couple of big things. It's not about cutting off your Timmy's apple fritter addiction, because that probably isn't going to make a big difference. It's going to make a difference for you to say, yep, I'm going to rent out a room to a foreign language student. I'm going to sell my car, whatever it is. So A, B, C, analyze, brainstorm, change. This is a sustainable spending model that you can get into very, very quickly without making grand proclamations of how you're going to budget for the rest of your life.
Agreed. And that's, we do the same thing, because people will call us and sort of say, hey, I got concerns. And we also go through their options and refer them and try to tell them about that budget idea. Because I think that's pretty important, is if you can do it yourself or you don't need someone like us, go see that mortgage broker, bank consolidation. Yeah. But one of the things that I see that people are getting caught in is there is an abundance of ads on social media, predominantly, offering credit rebuilding advice.
Yeah.
You want to comment on those?
I'm sighing. So here's the thing. Credit rebuilding is not actually that complicated. And what I worry about with those for-profit services is they're providing a service that either you could get from a nonprofit credit counselor or that you don't actually need. So if the basics of your situation say you're going to need a consumer proposal, you should go directly to an LIT, to a licensed insolvency trustee, and some of this for-profit credit counseling or debt consultants, all that, they charge a pretty significant fee. And I'm not super well informed on what that fee is. I've just heard a lot of horror stories about it. So instead, start with a nonprofit credit counselor. They can make those referrals, or start with a licensed insolvency trustee, and they can give you those options. By the way, we hear from a lot of licensed insolvency trustees who say to their clients, you actually don't need a consumer proposal. You should go talk to Credit Canada, because they can give you counseling. They can give you the sorts of things that we can give you that a licensed insolvency trustee can't. So I think of this as a continuation or a continuum of services. Clients with debt challenges, they've got lots of challenges for lots of different reasons. Their circumstances are different, and there are many different solutions, of which we are one.
So thanks very much for joining us today, Bruce. And thanks to the viewers for joining us as well. If you have questions or comments on the show, or would like to suggest a topic for a future show, you can contact us through the Rogers TV home, email us through the Rogers homepage for this show. Thanks very much.